All right. Welcome, Raider Nation. Raiders 17-16 winners over the Denver Broncos. And we're going to talk about the game here on Silver and Black today, the post-game edition. Raiders go 1-0. Big road win against the Denver Broncos. It didn't feel like it was going to go that way, and we will talk about it. And as always, joining me is our voice of the fan, our good friend Murf from Raiders Fan Radio, who's got to be really happy. Wearing his Raiders Fan Radio, like Jack Daniels looking shirt there, it looks like, right? Yeah, there we go. I dig it. But Murph, I'll tell you what, a lot of fans on Twitter, I always interactive during games, and a lot of them, as the Raiders rolled into halftime, the Broncos went down, scored, and it didn't look good, and the Raiders defense wasn't playing great. There was just a lot of kind of, I think, first game mess ups going on here. This team didn't look real disciplined at first, but listen, they come out with a win, 17-16, play big at the end.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, like, you know, I was down pretty bad there for like a lot of the third quarter and a lot of the fourth and whatnot, and like and shout out my girl Valerie, like, you know, like hanging on the couch, and I'm like, and I'm dying over here because I'm like, this is like, it doesn't matter how much we change personnel, coaching, you know, strategies, schemes, like it would still Raider football no matter what. But then here we go. This team finds a way to be resilient in the end and finds a way to pull out a victory. And I've said this for a long time on a lot of different, you know, on topics around the Raiders. The Raiders can have challenges in terms of like officiating and those kinds of things. But the old school Raiders used to win despite of those things. And so, like, this feels like, I don't want to be a total prisoner of the moment, but this feels like a game that everything was working against us, from Jimmy G taking a freaking hit in the first series and us going like collectively like, oh my gosh, here we go. Didn't even take a game for this guy to go down, to the cheap shot that happened. And what's his bucket should have been kicked out of the freaking game, if you ask me. But the cheap shot on Jakobi Meyers, the penalties, and not only the penalties that shouldn't have been penalties, but the penalties by us that were completely mistimed and ill-timed, I should say, like Luke Masters. Like, there were so many things that were so Raidery about this, but we still won. So, like, that's incredible. Like, to go from where we were an hour ago to how this feels right now, this is freaking epic, man. I'm telling you, this is a great start to the season, and we've got such a tough schedule early on. Like, this was huge for the Raiders to lock this down, and I'm keeping track of the scores here on my phone. Let's hope the freaking Dolphins pull this one out. We're in first place, Scott.
It looks like they're getting close. That game's been crazy as well. But Raider Disrespect 777 had a good point. He said good teams find a way to win when they're not playing their best football. And clearly that's the case here. I mean, the Raiders, you look at how they started off. Jimmy G and the crew go down. They get the Jakobi Meyers touchdown, of course, then the first penalty of the game. Don't get me started on penalties. After that, a taunting penalty. You get it a little hyped up beginning of the game. Okay, fine. It happens. But they look good to start off with. And then that defense, you see a lot of the issues that are still on defense that presented themselves. A lack of pass rush up the middle. The Broncos did a good job. Russell Wilson got out of the pocket a lot early. That's why they were able to march down, keep the game close, especially in the beginning. But then as the game wore on, you saw the offense kind of start to tail off. They couldn't really get things going. You look at the Raiders and what they were doing on defense, and I had somebody say to me, well, you can't blame the defense on this one. The offense isn't moving the ball. Sound familiar? But you can, because the penalties on defense kill. The penalties at key points gave this Broncos team a new lease on life. Then you had the roughing the punter call. Again, that's like a turnover. So you see this stuff happen. Now, first game of the season, the Raiders very lucky they were able to come back and be resilient and win this one. But, man, coming out of this game, there's a lot of discipline, a lot of things that got to be cleaned up with this Raiders offense and with this Raiders defense so that they're all going on the same page.
Yeah, just that turnover in the end zone alone. I'm like, Lord have mercy. Like, oh, when can we stop this kind of stuff? Like, when can we stop throwing picks in the end zone? And listen, and I've you know, the times that I've been critical of Derek over the years, it's been that like when you look at the numbers on paper, they don't look all that bad. But when you look at the timing of errors, that was always the biggest thing. It was like, it's one thing when you have an interception on the stat sheet, but don't have an interception in the freaking end zone, for crying out loud. And then here we go. It's what Jimmy G pulls off. And I'm like, and listen, and even on, this is like, you want to talk about freaking, and I'm not, I hate to use the term sometimes because I hate to undersell and do any disrespect to the actual term, but we got PTSD when it comes to some of these things. And when you hear Jimmy G go, oh yeah, that one's on me. I'm like, oh no.
Oh no,
don't say that. Oh, no, we don't want to hear that.
Flashbacks.
That. Like, we've been there, done that. Like, we don't want to, I don't want to hear it's on me. Just freaking whatever. But point being, though, is that the Raiders ultimately overcame those mistakes. Like, you couldn't have given the game to Denver any better. And then it starts raining and like all this stuff. And, and it's bad enough that the announcers and everything else is just so slanted against the Raiders, and it always has been. And so there's no surprise there, but it's just like, it just kind of piles insult on injury. And then again, you got the dirty hits and all that kind of stuff. So for the Raiders to pull this thing out, to listen, Patrick Graham, like, I'm not going to say he saves his job on this game, but like, he certainly saves himself a huge amount of criticism. He's still going to get some, but man, can you imagine what it would have been like? Because it's like, it's not even so much like scheming and things, and it's like play calling and that kind of stuff. Like, those things I feel like we can't be critical of, early, not as much in terms of criticism for the coaches, but the discipline, like, yeah, bless it, man. Like, come on, can we stop with the stupid stuff, man? It's like, yeah. And so then that's got to be on the coaches. I was even thinking at one point when we started having all these defensive lapses, I'm like, listen, I will defend Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler until they give me a reason not to. And I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, oh wow, if we're really going to give this thing away, like, how arrogant were they going into this game, thinking that we had enough horsepower on defense to get this thing done? But ultimately, in the end, they did. So my brain started going that way, and I started going down that hater path because I'm thinking like, okay, like I'm Mr. Positive in the offseason, but give me a reason to freaking, and a lot of other fans too, give us a reason and we'll start being hypercritical of what's going on. And I was thinking, oh, here we go. Week one, we're already going that way.
But Murph, I thought the same thing though with Patrick Graham, because the defense was not performing well. The discipline, there was one offsides call that I could understand. It was the Tillery, the first one, because Russell Wilson does have a good, he's been known for it his entire career. So his cadence, he does it really well. So you get one a game, okay. But the roughing calls, all these other things that happen were certainly avoidable. But I thought the same thing. Also, we turn our focus to offensive coaching. And I look, Josh Jacobs, 19 carries, 48 yards, a 2.5 yard average. Now, you got to give the Broncos a little credit. Their defense is not bad. They played pretty well up front, but the play calling at times, I'm not getting overly critical here because the Raiders won. But if you look at it, it was interesting. I had shades of last season when it seemed as though the Raiders' offensive game plan didn't include running. Okay, first couple scripted plays, first drive, yeah, you run the ball, and then they get away from it, and then they have to come back to it eventually because they need to. And I felt that way. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, it was interesting, and I feel like they got away from it because Josh was struggling.
He was.
Like, he really wasn't doing a lot early on. And so you even saw Zamir White get mixed in a little bit there earlier than we would have normally have seen him. And I thought, okay, well, maybe they're moving away from it because it's just not working. And then they started doing a lot of the play action. You saw the flea flicker, and you saw, like, it was like they were trying to do stuff to kind of, like, I hate to say capitalize on his lack of productivity early on, but they started doing things to try to get Denver off the line of scrimmage a little bit there and then get him going. But just like I said, though, like about, when things happen, right? Josh struggled clearly in this game early on.
Yeah.
But in the end, when we needed a closer and it's raining and everyone in the whole stadium knows you're going to run the freaking football, Josh Jacobs got it done. And so I got to give him props for that. I also will applaud the coaches for I forget the exact sequence of plays because it's just all so fresh and emotional in my mind. But, like, I feel like they threw one there in the end that was unexpected. And so, like, for them to pull that stuff off, but for Josh to kind of close this game out, I mean, no one wants to see your freaking, your running back that you're paying $12 million a year get 48 yards a game. But when did he get those yards? He got them when the Raiders needed him most.
He did.
And the other thing I'll say too is that, like, Josh Jacobs might, and I'm biased, so I'm just whatever. And there's most all of you listening, I'm sure are. Josh Jacobs is the best in the league at either avoiding that first hit or getting out of that first hit and then making a positive gain out of it. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, he's in midseason form already. Like, I mean, for a guy that wasn't around for the offseason, like, that was pretty impressive, man. Some of that stuff that, I mean, people are grabbing at his legs and everything behind the line of scrimmage, and he's just freaking wiggling out of it and falling forward for 3 yards, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you look at it again, and I think it's evident. I don't care how good a shape you're in. And I know Josh Jacobs is in great shape because we saw him when he came back to the Raiders after signing his new contract. He was in shape, but there's in shape and there's game shape, getting hit by people shape. And I didn't expect him to come out and have a massive day, even though the record against the Broncos is so stellar. But you got to play into it. Just like people who were talking about Tyree Wilson being slow off the ball on defense. Yes, at times for sure he was. But again, this is the first time he's played against live action since he was in college last November. So I think there's opportunity there for the team to get better. Jimmy Garoppolo, again, ran the ball. Now, again, he's not going to run the ball a lot, but he had an 8-yard run. He had a big first down run there towards the end of the game. 9 carries, 11 yards as well. You mentioned the 1 carry by Zamir White for 2 yards. Jimmy Garoppolo on the night, Murph, 20 of 26, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, the 1 interception, which is a tip ball. Not a great pass. It was into a crowd, so I'll give Jimmy credit for the interception because it wasn't like a bad tip. It was just not a well-thrown ball. But overall, in his first game as a Raider, I thought he was very efficient, and this is the kind of quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo is. He's going to get a couple big passes here and there, but he's going to go down the field and matriculate and get you into the red zone and hopefully score there.
Shout out Hank Stram there. Good pull, Scott. Like that.
You got it.
Like that. Like, man, like, you know, this is what is interesting. So when you looked at, and you guys say this a lot on your show, and much props to you. It's hard to talk about the current state of quarterback play for the Raiders and not talk about the guy that was playing before. And so this is not about like necessarily comparing players or whatever, but when we got to look at, it's hard not to consider a 9-year history. So when we look at Jimmy Garoppolo, no one came in thinking, okay, this guy's going to throw for 4,000 yards and, 40 touchdowns. We didn't expect these big numbers, but this is the kind of game we expected. Like you said, 20 for 26, he throws for a couple hundred yards and a couple of tutties. Like, that's really all you need Jimmy Garoppolo to do. And if you can do that and you can score in the red zone, which, again, not comparing, but let's consider what happened today. Our last quarterback makes 4 trips in the end zone today before he can get one in for a touchdown. And it won him the game. So props to him and the Saints for getting it done. If Ryan Tannehill doesn't throw 3 interceptions for crying out loud, then they probably lose that game. But point being, though, he got it done ultimately, but it was really not all that successful in the red zone. It was kind of like same old. Right. And what do the Raiders do today? First time in the red zone, bam, touchdown. Like, those are the kind of things that, like, that's what's going to win us football games. It's like being effective and being efficient at the times in which it counts most. And so that's where I was very critical of Jimmy G throwing that pick, that ill-advised throw like you're talking about. Like, that was terrible. He hung on to it way too long. Yeah. He's got Devontae running, I don't know if it's the middle of the field or whatever. Yeah, like he's right there. Like, so that was not a good play by Jimmy. But if we can minimize those and do what we did in the first freaking drive, like, yeah. The Broncos, I don't think anybody's expecting the Broncos to go freaking, maybe not even be a playoff team. So I don't want to totally get at it, crazy here. But listen, they're coached well. Russ is Russ. They've got some playmakers on defense. We did a lot of self-inflicted things today. So for the Raiders to ultimately pull it out, for Jimmy to have the game that Jimmy did, like, it's hard not to be encouraged at least a little bit. I'm not saying that we got to turn a blind eye to stuff that happened, because we got a lot of issues to work on.
Sure, but you got to win games.
Yeah, they look better than a 6-win team to me, Scott. Don't you think?
Well, yeah. This 3-game stretch, we've been talking about it for weeks, right? It's going to be a tough one. You open up the season with 2 tough road games. It gets tougher next week against Buffalo, by the way. Yeah. But you go. This is a division rival. This is a big deal. You have Sean Payton there, of course. He's one of the golden boys of national media because people love to talk about him. And so for the Raiders to go in there and win, and all the doubts about them. Again, you need to I've said it all along, the Raiders need to put in the work quietly because nobody's going to give a damn about them. Nobody's going to give them any chance to do anything. And it's still too early to tell if they will do something. But You have to go step by step. It's a week by week league. The Raiders go out, didn't play their best football. They did at times towards the end of the game. Jimmy Garoppolo with a big fourth quarter comeback. That was a fourth quarter comeback. They come back, they score when they need to score. They get the ball back. They hold on defense. To me, that was a big one. I said the comment before they went on that defensive stand. I said, look, they have got to stop him here to win this game. And they did. They stopped. And not only that, but then they got the ball back on offense. And what did they do? We saw a lot of times over the last couple years under both coaches, different coaches, this team get the ball late in the game when they had a chance to wind out the clock and win the game, and they couldn't do it. Punt the ball back. What happens? Other team goes down, scores, and wins the ball game. So I think you have to take the good with the bad. There's definitely things that need to be worked on here. You're not going to hear all unicorns and rainbows from us. But at the same time, enjoy the win and start to think about, okay, what are they got a lot of work to do if they're not going to get blown out in Buffalo, frankly, because Buffalo, if they put you down, they will put you down. So the Raiders are going to have to play much more spirited football and clean football on defense if they're going to have a chance in Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get away with stuff like this. And I know that the Chiefs lost in week 1, but like, we're not going to get away with this stuff, doing this against the Chiefs, right, or doing against the Bills, or doing against a lot of, even the Jets and maybe even the Giants. We'll find out how good they are tomorrow night, or tonight. I guess they're starting here in a little bit, but we're going to find out a lot of, things about this Raider team. And yeah, and if we don't improve in those areas, we're going to get smoked by any of those other good teams. So there are things that they have to build on. But like you said, though, and I think this is important, is that there's a lot of media outlets that will tell you week 1 is a lie. And it's true, because there are teams that come out of the gate hot and don't make the playoffs. And then there are teams that look terrible in week 1 and then, end up, with a freaking bye week or whatever. Like, it happens. So I'm not going to totally get crazy. But when you consider the idea that we got to take this thing week to week, this is week 1. And at the end of week 1, because now that game is over, the Las Vegas Raiders sit alone in first place in the AFC West. Now, I don't care how you feel as a Raider fan about the ultimate way that the game played out. If that's not something to get you at least a little bit fired up, I don't know what is, because everybody else lost in our division, and we hate them all, like, more than anybody. And we freaking won. Like that. I mean, so for this week, I'm in. I'm in, and I'm going to take that, and I'm going to be excited about it. And I would encourage everybody to find solace in that as a fan, because it may not be like that tomorrow. Next week. You never. I mean, what is going to just watch what media is going to do, and that I'm not like talking about you guys per se, because you guys are completely different than what I think that a lot of the other national media is. But like, what if we go and beat Buffalo? What if we beat Buffalo on the road? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think Rich Eisen's going to be talking about? What do you think Kyle Brandt's going to be talking about? What do you think Colin Cowherd's going to be talking about? What do you think Dan Patrick's going to be talking about? These guys are going to be talking about the freaking Raiders. Like, what a cool position to be in. And I hope that the Raiders, and I'm sure that they are considering that idea that they have a chance to start putting a stamp on this season. And it starts next week against the freaking Buffalo Bills, who will be, what are we, like a 7.5 point dog, I think, in that game. So watch the Raiders go in there and win a thing. Like, that would be crazy.
Yes, stranger things have happened, but there's lots of work to be done. We're going to take a quick break here on Silver and Black Today, which is an Odyssey original podcast. Do us a favor, by the way, if you don't already subscribe, even those folks that are watching us live on video now, go subscribe on the audio portion, and you'll get all of our shows all week long, wherever you get your audio. You're with Murf and Scott. We're coming right back after this. All right, welcome back. Silver and Black Today, the post-game edition. Raiders, they win 17-16 on the road in Denver. Yes, some of you aren't happy even with this, but you should be. It's a win. Yes, there's things to fix. Yes, not everything went according to plan, I think, but that's okay. The Raiders are 1-0. Enjoy it while you can. While you can say your team is undefeated. Joining me, as always, here on this show is my good friend Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. You can follow him on Twitter @_Murf, MURF. Make sure you also go subscribe to the Raiders Fan Radio YouTube page. You can also get their podcast wherever you get your audio. Support them as well. Reminder, we are trying to raise money for the One Nation Foundation, which Murf will tell you towards the end of the show about the foundation if you haven't heard about it. But you can go up on DC4L Custom Tees. You can order your Midtown Mo, so Mo's shirt, and also the Aiden O'Connell shirt. There's also lots up there as well if you're into Raiders stuff. I think your shirts are up there too, aren't they, Murf? Some of your show shirts? You're on T Republic.
Yeah, we're on T Public, but yeah,
T Public. Yes,
it's so kind of Dan and DC4L folks to partner up with you guys and to send for every shirt that you buy there, they send $4 to the One Nation Foundation. And so we're incredibly thankful for that and incredibly thankful for the response. Like we've already gotten so many like Twitter tags and all kind of like people are buying those shirts like crazy. I see more Midtown Mo shirts than I do Raider gear on Twitter for crying out loud.
It's really funny. Even Michelle on your show taking pictures, which was good. It looked really great. Absolutely.
On her, we ordered hoodies. So we're just waiting on the hoodies to come.
Yeah. The hoodies are good. It's getting to be that time of the season. By the way, also, yes, you can catch Murph shirts up there on T Public. That's where you can also get our show shirts, by the way, if you want, or if you're looking for that. Also, if you do any super chat on YouTube on our channel, we're forwarding that to the One Nation Foundation at the end of the season. So everything that comes through is going right to them as well. So if you guys feel obliged there, please know that it's going to the One Nation Foundation. Again. Okay, let's go jump back into some of the stats here, Murph, because you look at this, again, we talked about Garoppolo, we talked about Jacobs, Jakobi Meyers, and hopefully he's okay. Hopefully he's back for next week. We don't have a report yet on his condition. Clearly he was under the concussion protocol after what I still think, I got people arguing with me on Twitter that it wasn't a dirty hit. I watched it over and over again, and I don't understand. You're leading with your head and your forearm. You don't tackle with your forearm. So for any of you who have not played football, you don't tackle with your forearm. So BS. But Jakobi Meyers, 9 receptions and 81 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 10 targets. So on 10 targets, he had 9 catches for 81 yards. Devontae Adams, 6 receptions, 66 yards. Josh Jacobs, 2 for 23. And Austin Hooper with the big 1 turnaround catch, 1 for 20 yards. Jakobi Meyers, now you have an idea of why they went out and got him. He really clicked with Jimmy G, and you can see why. Little bigger. Now, Hunter Renfrow didn't have any targets tonight, playing the same position, so you can read from that what you want. But Jakobi Meyers brings something different to that position, Murph. We saw it. I think we'll see it even more as this team starts to open up its offense more, involve the tight ends more often, and do some other things that'll open it up a little bit. But Jakobi Meyers, man, boy, did he make a difference tonight for the Raiders.
Yeah, he looked fantastic. And, we saw that, they had their best defender on Devontae, Patrick Surtain. That he was on Devontae most of the night or day. And then also too, they were bracketing him like crazy. So there wasn't a ton of opportunities for Devontae to work himself open. When he did, I was glad that Jimmy was able to find him. But I think that, when you have a situation like that, where you've got, arguably the best wide receiver in football, and defensively, they have made a choice to take him out of the game, right, per se, to have another guy that can step up and take advantage of those one-on-ones and work open, like, even in the middle of the field, like, yeah, you can't not be encouraged by that. With the Renfrow thing was interesting to me, and I wonder, and people that watch film and study tape and all that kind of stuff, which I am not, I'm a schmuck in my freaking bonus room for crying out loud. So I'll leave it to the people that do that stuff so much better than I ever could. But I'm curious to find out if he wasn't featured or if he just wasn't getting open. And that's going to be interesting to see, because if he wasn't being featured, then maybe some of this, and I don't know, it could have been game plan. And that's the other thing too. It's like, it's hard to make up your mind about what direction the Raiders are going in based on one game. Because if they're doing their job effectively, they're game planning completely different game to game. So maybe this was just a choice that, like, Hunter's skill set based on the defensive talent or whatever, like, there just wasn't good matchups for him. Yep. Or, you know what I mean? So he just wasn't featured, or they were putting him in positions to win and he wasn't. So I think there's something interesting to find out about that, to find out about Renfrow. But anyway, but the point being, though, more importantly than Renfrow's lack of success was Meyers accelerating and just doing fantastic in this offense. And and you can see, like, I'm not a huge fan of coaches that come in and go, okay, I got to get my guys, and if I don't have my guys, we can't do it my way. Like, there's a big part of me that feels like, well, maybe you should kind of adjust to some of the talent that you have already around you, and let's see how good of a coach you are and see what you can scheme up with what you already got. That said, that's not what these guys are doing. So I got to be able to embrace what they are doing. And what they have said is that they're going to go out and get a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo and get a guy like Jakobi Meyers, because that's what will work in their system. And sure enough, we saw it today. So I'm with you. I think that was very encouraging. And now also too, if we start to see defenses scheme to take Jakobi Meyers out, all right, we'll take one-on-ones with Devontae all day long. Just throw it on up there and let him go get it, you know?
And we didn't see a lot of tight end targets. We saw really just the one today. Michael Mayer's got to play. He had the big holding call, just a really, really bad call on him. A bad call because of a bad penalty that he committed, not a bad call on the referees. And so I think the Raiders are going to have to play into that, because they do have I expect the 2 tight end sets as well. So there's a lot of things that they didn't open up with, I think, in this game that they will get to when they feel more comfortable and have the confidence in their talent to do so. But clearly Jakobi Meyers done it. I'm looking in the chat, and besides our good friend Just Win Philippe, who tells me that the camera adds 10 pounds to my forehead, which I laugh at, because I mean, yeah, okay, if I have a big forehead, but big forehead's a sign of intelligence, Philippe, just so you know. And my forehead only got bigger as my hairline goes back. So remember that. That's
true, yeah.
And the 10 pounds is just me eating too much. It's not nothing
do
to
that
do with
too, Scott. I got one of those hairlines. Yeah.
There you go. But anyway, it's great going on in the chat there. Great discussion going over there. And we appreciate you guys being there. But the other thing I want to talk about, Murph, too, was the defensive side of the ball, because there was, again, a lot of issues we saw there. A lot of the same things we saw last year. We saw a big push in the preseason up the middle. We didn't see it tonight. Jerry Tillery had a couple plays where I think he really did well, got in there, had the 1 sack. Maxx Crosby had a sack. Maxx Crosby's just an animal, and he's doing what he does. And on the other side, we saw Malcolm Kuntz, a couple nice plays, nothing to write home about, but he played okay. And then, of course, you had Tyree Wilson, who's playing himself into shape. Was slow off the ball mostly, but a couple times showed his speed. And so I think it's going to be a work in progress. The problem is, Murph, like, they have till next week to get things a little better, the next step better, because facing Josh Allen and that Bills offense, it's going to be a tough task.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. And if we don't disrupt Josh Allen, and it's early in the year, so Josh Allen hasn't taken those big hits yet that we see him do. You know what I mean? Because he'll get out of the pocket and he'll get blasted, running down the sideline or whatever. So we haven't seen. So we've got a fresh Josh Allen to contend with, and so yeah, I mean it's going to be tough. And so getting disruptive in the middle of the field, which has been a thing that for the criticism that's been lobbied towards the Raiders in this offseason, it's been their lack of addressing a few positions, and obviously linebackers one of them, and the interior of the defensive line has been another one, and like you said, we saw Jerry Tillery do some things today. But other than that, it was pretty quiet. If you don't have, listen, Maxx Crosby, as you said, he's a completely different player than everybody else that's on the field. That's
not even close.
Phenomenal to watch. That one series that he completely took over. He gets the holding, he gets the pressure, he gets the sack, he gets that, like, it was like 3, next thing you know, it's like, well, 3rd and 34 or whatever the heck it was. Like, I mean, Maxx Crosby completely took over on that drive. But he can't do it alone, and right. Divine Diablo had some fantastic plays during that as well. I believe he's the one that got the actual tackle behind the line of scrimmage. And we saw Divine Diablo flash a little bit today. And he was, I think Maxx, going into this coming out of the offseason, one of the things I felt was that Maxx Crosby had the opportunity to become the defensive player of the year. And I think that he showed that today. But I also felt that, like, for the Raiders, their most improved player, their most impactful, player that would jump was going to be Divine Diablo. I thought he was going to flash on the screen. And I think he did. And we saw Spillane make a couple of plays too. But if it wasn't for Diablo's efforts today, I mean, the Raiders aren't in a position to win the game that they are. And I'll give one more shout out as well. Jack Bennett, man, that kid, like, I know he gave up a couple of plays, but look, first game as a rookie. But what I really liked about him was the physicality that he brings to corner. I think that we are looking at the future of the Raiders secondary when we look at Jacory and Bennett. Marcus Peters, on the other hand, little rough today. Like, and I know he had some great plays, but they brought up a point, even the announcers, and I didn't take this as like a hater kind of comment like a lot of announcers are. did Marcus Peters, does he lose enough of a step to where he's got a hold on some stuff? And we can't do that. We can do that against Kansas City. We're toast. You know what I mean? We're never going to get it going. We can do that against Buffalo.
And to your point about Ja'Cory Bennett, he got beat on that big long one. But listen, that's a rookie game right there. There's no, and listen, the Broncos receiving core was very depleted. This was not, Cortland Sutton's a good wide receiver, and that's who beat him. So you understand it to a certain degree, but you're going to see that from a rookie. You don't expect him to go out in the first game. You got jitters, you got all that stuff. But I agree with you. He's a physical back, and I think he will, over time, become exactly what they think he will be. Marcus Peters, on the other hand, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think we have the one-game sample. You would expect more out of them, but at the same time, again, he didn't go to camp. He's a veteran, and so how many times do we see this? I think you saw it this week again. Defenses overall dominated the NFL this weekend. The Charger-Dolphin game, by the way, Murph, Tua to Tyreek Hill for 4 yards inside the 2-minute warning, and the Dolphins beat the Chargers. So you have that one, and I had somebody in the comments talking about how the announcers were talking about the Chargers were going to go to a Super Bowl before that loss, and it's funny too, because for those of you who've watched the show for a long time, I grew up a Charger fan. I gave them up in 2014 because I just cover the sport. I no longer have a favorite team, and I love when people roll in there with, "Oh, he's a Charger fan," but the Chargers are so. He's the worst coach I've ever seen. If you think Josh McDaniels is bad, go watch Brandon Staley, because he did it again today. From reading the play-by-play here, I did not watch the game that much, but I'm watching the play-by-play notes, and it's crazy. So we'll transition to that, because I saw a lot of, I think, the same people who didn't like Josh McDaniels this year come out. Overall, I thought it was fine. I thought offensively the Raiders did okay. The play calling at times I was questioning. But then again, I don't know what's happening on the ground, so it's easy for me to criticize. It's easy for people to blame coaching. On the play that Jimmy G threw the interception in the back of the end zone, for example, Murph, I had people say, "Oh, but Josh McDaniels a terrible play call." He didn't call that. He called the play. He put Devontae Adams for the first time in the game in the slot, so he wasn't against Patrick Surtain, and it worked flawlessly. It's just Jimmy couldn't get him the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never understood the McDaniels hate. I don't get it. It's too short of a resume as a Las Vegas Raider to start making up your mind around this kind of stuff. And I again, while I can, made the same point earlier about I'm not a huge fan of coaches that come in and say, well, it's got to be this way, and I've got to get players, and it takes time to build it, and blah blah blah. I feel at times we as Raider fans, we've had enough with the whole patience game. We've been patient for a long time. Let's freaking turn this thing around. But that said, I've not seen these major lapses in offensive play calling. I think that, and again, not to go back and to talk about old stuff, but there was clearly a disconnect between him and Derek Carr. There was a disconnect between him and Darren Waller. There's a reason those guys aren't on the football team anymore. And so when you have a disconnect between employer and employee, guess what? One of them is going to end up moving on. And when you're the one carrying the bag, and you're the one that has you're the shot caller, then you're going to freaking move on from those players. Yes. And so, there was a lack of success based on that. And now, again, this is not save it, the freaking tweets and the YouTube comments and all that kind of stuff. It's not about pointing a finger at a player and saying, "Oh, that guy's fault and he sucks." It's not about that. It's about his willingness or lack thereof to embrace the system and the environment in which he's being presented. And that clearly was, for whatever reason, there was a disconnect there. So there was a lack of success. Well, so that's not Josh McDaniels' fault. And so you got to give him an opportunity to show what he can do with personnel that are in. And so when we look at today, like you mentioned, it was when Jimmy G started improving, that's when things went downhill. Right. When it was 1-2 ball out, everything seemed to go just fine to me. You know what I'm saying? So Jimmy, other than that bad pick on that improvised play, there were no passes that were there was that one close one over the middle. I feel like that was the Austin Hooper catch where it was oh Lord, it was kind of late in the game. And it looked like that one could have been, maybe a little late and could have been picked. But outside of that, Jimmy G looked really comfortable, and Josh McDaniels' play calling looked pretty freaking good to me. So, again, I don't understand that level of criticism. And at the end of the day, I will say this. It's all about putting more numbers in the left column than it is in the right. Absolutely. If anything, we were critical of Derek. That's it. Like, what was the thing we were most critical about Derek? Is that lack of winning. What's the criticism, the overriding criticism for Josh McDaniels? Lack of winning as a head coach. Well, okay. So far in this season, which is the only one that we got, he won the first game. They won the first game.
He's 1-0.
That's it. All counts.
But it goes back to I talked to Michael Lombardi this week about his new book for my rollover at sportsnot.com. And the one thing that he talks about in this book, and I do recommend the book, a lot of Al Davis in the book, a lot of AFL, AFC. So if you like that stuff, if you like old school football, it's a great book. Especially if you're very young, Murph, you and I are close in age. So like we lived through some of that. But for those of you who are younger and you're watching or listening, it's a great book on the history of football. But he talks about being in the right situation. You can be a great coach, a great player, and be in the wrong situation, and you just will not succeed. And I think that's where, yes, not exactly exciting for a Raider fan to say, okay, Jimmy G's our quarterback for at least 2 years, because you're thinking you want that transcendent quarterback you need to probably win a Super Bowl, right? The Patrick Mahomes, those types of guys, the Joe Burrows, those types of guys you want. But in the meantime, as you get closer to that, you want someone who can capitalize on the situation, who runs the system. And that's exactly what you just hit on, Murph. And I see people in the chat agreeing. You might not be the Jimmy G fan overall, like, oh my gosh, this guy, I'm so excited about this guy, but he gets it done and he wins. And even on the telecast, they said that. They said, you know what? You can say what you want about Jimmy G. He doesn't stay healthy, all that stuff. And some of that's true, but the guy does win. And yes, he had a great cast in San Francisco. Don't get me wrong. I understand the credit there. But overall, this is the kind of thing you do. And I caution fans, because I know like you said, Raiders fans, patience is gone. Okay. But I think this year you're going to see gritty wins like you saw now, and then you're going to see losses. And you can't get down too much with the losses, because I think if they're executing well and they lose, that's one thing. If they execute poorly, and we saw what we saw tonight with the penalties, because I don't think you can have penalties like that against Buffalo or a better team, or when they come home to face the Chargers, you can't do that. So you have to be able to get over that, and that's the discipline that they carry away. But I agree with you, Murph. The situation is a big deal, and this team's a work in progress, and so you have to look at it game by game in that way.
Absolutely. And being a guy that's, I've turned the calendar enough times to remember the Raiders of the 70s. Even if it wasn't for the actually like sitting there watching the game as a kid, it was all the stories that I heard from my dad and my uncles, and all the amazing stories about the Raiders of the 70s and training camp at Santa Rosa and yada yada yada, all that stuff. And I've been alive for all three of the Raiders Super Bowls. I can tell you this, that like when you look at the stat sheet and you look at Kenny Stabler, when you look at Jim Plunkett, when you look at even Darryl LaMonica to a certain extent, great players aren't always great, but they're always great when they have to be, is the famous line, right? Mm-hmm. Jim Plunkett wasn't a guy that willed the Raiders to victory every time he took the field. And there's people out there that are clamoring for him to be in the Hall of Fame. Jim Plunkett, as the kids would say nowadays, he'd be considered mid. But what did he do when it counted most? When you look at Kenny Stabler, who through the history of his career, threw more interceptions than touchdown passes, and is still in the Hall of Fame, why? Because of the sea of hands, because of running in on hobbled legs and the immaculate deception to give the Raiders even an opportunity to win, to coming on and crushing the freaking Minnesota Vikings, as Bill King famously said. He's playing the Minnesota Vikings defense like a violin. Like when you look at like what the Raiders' best quarterbacks in history have done, they weren't blowing it up on in the regular season. And Jimmy G is way more Jim Plunkett and Kenny Stabler than he is, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes. So I'm with you. And some things, and I know the game is much different. So save me that argument too, Raider Nation. Like, I know that we're not playing the same game we were playing in the early 80s and the late 70s. I get it. But there are some things that still translate. Good defense, run the ball, take care of the football, don't turn it over, and do what you need to do at the time in which it counts most. Put the ball in the end zone when it counts most. Get that first down, that critical first down, Josh Jacobs, when it counts most. Convert that third down. You know what I'm saying? Like, put the ball in the end zone and the red zone. Those things, like, it doesn't matter what era of football you're considering. Those are the things that count. I'll give you another one. Create turnovers. We had a turnover tonight that was negated because of a stupid penalty, because of, unfortunately, Marcus Peters. But, like, those are the things. And if the Raiders can do those things, we can beat anybody. And Jimmy Garoppolo is good enough to get us to a champion because he's not a bad quarterback. He's smart.
No.
He's got some arm talent. Is he going to go out there and throw for freaking 400 some odd yards and throw darts down the middle of the field to Tyreek? No, that's not what he's going to do, but he doesn't have to. And so that's, you know, I don't know. I went on a tangent there, but I will say
Murph,
this.
You bring up a good point, though. And it's the other thing, too. Sometimes it's what you don't do, right? So to your point about Jim Plunkett, which I know some people are like, Jim Plunkett, Super Bowl. Yes, but remember, he got run out of New England because he was highly touted out of college, didn't pan out. Al Davis did what Al Davis does, is he found guys and turned them into great players. And so he did. So I think there's a comparison to be made there for certain. But also, Jimmy G, he does, from his history, he has periods of times where he does get into lulls where he might be a little lazy with the ball and he ends up in interceptions. But overall, if you look at what he did tonight, yes, he threw that ball in the end zone. It was intercepted. But again, and it was in the red zone, so it cost you points. So I'm not excusing it. But at the same time, overall, if you look at his decision-making, it's pretty good. It's really good most of the time. And so that should be something I think Raider fans should be excited about. Okay, we're going to take one more quick break. When we come back, Murph and I can close here. We're going to give out some game balls. We're going to talk about the One Nation Foundation. We'll look ahead to the week ahead in Raider Nation. You're listening to Silver and Black Today with Murph and Scott. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. Silver and Black Today. If I can get that out, Silver and Black Today, or now it's tonight because we're in the PM. Thanks for being with us, an Odyssey original podcast covering the Las Vegas Raiders. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get it. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for the chat. It's going crazy as always, just like it is on your show. It's awesome to see everybody in there having fun, talking about this Raiders 17-16 win in Denver over the Broncos. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe and the notifications bell so you can be a part of the discussion. Thanks and hello to everybody else on Twitter, Twitch, and Rumble as well. We're trying to be wherever we can where people are watching, so thank you for that. Murph is, of course, with Raiders Fan Radio. You can follow him on Twitter @_Murph. I'm at LV Gully. The show is SNB Today. And Murph, let's give out some game balls. Always fun to give out game balls. There's, I think, players deserving of it tonight, several. But I'd like to start with you and who you want to give the Raiders Fan Radio game ball to.
Wow, that's a great question. That's fun. You know, I know that overall the whole entirety of the game, he didn't have an impact every series, but when he did, it was massive. And so I'm going to go with my guy that I think is in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. I'm going to go with Maxx Crosby. I think that he's the heart of the defense, clearly. I think that he's also the oxygen of the defense. Like, it's like players follow his lead. He is so demonstrative in his leadership now. And I love the story of Maxx Crosby. You all are familiar with it, so I'll save the going over it. But like, to consider where he was to where he is, and for a guy that had 10.5 sacks his rookie year and to be exponentially better than where he was even as a rookie, I think it's impressive, man. And I couldn't be prouder to have him leading our team and to be the de facto leader of the team. And I know you've got Devontae, and I know there's Jimmy, and I know there's other guys that are leaders of the team as well. But when you look at Maxx Crosby and you see that freaking big old Raider shield on the back of that tricep on the screen, and it's like, and he's making plays, it's like, look at this freaking guy, man. Like, it's awesome. Like, I'll say this and I'll shut up. But like, earlier this year, when the Raiders, they bring in their alumni every year, and you see, Phil Villapiano, and you see all these guys like running around training camp and stuff. And I love the influence and the interaction that those former players, those greats, George Atkinson and all them, that they have in the offseason and on the team. Now, 2023, you can't be, as you mentioned, you can't lead with your forearm. You can't tackle like George Atkinson and Phil Villapiano anymore. You can't do that. But can the Raiders of 2023 take that idea and those concepts and that, like, the mystique of the Raiders of those past eras, can they take that and form that into something that can exist in 2023 in a healthy way? And I think that that's what the Raiders defense is starting to do, and no one epitomizes that better than Maxx Crosby, and it showed up today. So I know it's a long answer to the question, but that's who gets getting my game ball. And, much respect to the Condor, man. He's killing it.
He is. And I agree with you. He is the face of the franchise. I know it usually goes, but in the NFL, the quarterback, defensive end, sometimes wide receiver, those are the faces of today's NFL franchises, right? And so I think you're right about Maxx Crosby. I'm going to give the game ball on the offensive side. I have to give it to Jakobi Meyers. I have not seen, obviously, because we went on the air right after the game, so I do not have any detail on an update on injury on that. Usually they're not going to give us one tonight anyway when you have a concussion. So hopefully he's only in it for a day or two and can get out and get ready for Buffalo. But 9 catches, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns in his Raiders debut. And they were big catches. And he also had some other big catches, getting open, finding the space in the slot. And so I'm going to give him the offensive game ball, and really excited about what he's able to bring this. And Davante Adams, like you said, tonight, Jakobi Meyers got away with a lot and got open a lot and all that. As he demands a little more attention, that's going to free up Davante Adams. That'll free up Michael Mayer and Austin Hooper, as well as even Josh Jacobs come out of the backfield. So there's going to have a lot of opportunities there, and I think it's going to be exciting for this offense, who I think can be very explosive. I think we saw pieces of that tonight, Murph. They're just going to have to get a little more consistent and I think a little more comfortable working as a unit.
Yeah, I think once Josh gets going, again, he struggled a little bit early on in the game. And, can you imagine if Josh Jacobs has like a Josh Jacobs kind of game like he's had in the past against the Broncos? Like, this thing might not even be as close as it was. I mean, and considering, and that's the thing that's really got me about this game, and I'm going to really lock into this, is that there was a lot of things tonight that looked like Raiders football has looked like for a long time.
Yeah.
But we still won. And it was like before, or at least in semi-recent history, it was like everything had to be absolutely perfect for us to win a football game. We didn't overcome, adversity very well in many incarnations of this team. And that's what we did tonight. Like, we overcame a lot and still pulled it out. So, once Josh gets going, and he will. There's a reason he led the league last year. He ain't going to have a 48-yard game for 16 more games. He's going to get going. And when he gets going and we have the efficiency in this passing game and Maxx Crosby's having the impact that he has on defense, look out, man. We did our schedule prediction show the other night, and I had the Raiders at 9 wins. And I don't think anything happened today that made me feel like we were going to win more than that, nor less than that. I think that we're going to be an improved football team, be in the conversation, but I think that we're going to win the games we should, which has not been something that in the past, or at least recent past, that we haven't done. We've lost a lot of the games that we should. I'll never forget that game in Atlanta, for crying out loud, a few years ago. That was just how did we lose to that team?
It was ugly.
It was ugly. It was terrible. It was just what team showed up today, so anyways, the point being though, is that I think this version of the Raiders, just my opinion as a fan, I think that we're going to win the games we should. We'll probably lose the games that we expect. Chiefs, Bills, those kinds of games, those are tough. But when it comes to playing Pittsburgh in Las Vegas, we probably will win that game. Can we beat the Jets in Las Vegas? Probably not. Can we beat the Giants? Probably so. You start going down the list, and ultimately I think that we're a 9-win football team, and that's good enough to show an improvement over prior year. Secures everybody their jobs. No one's going to be ran out of town. And, because if the Raiders are embarrassed, we know Mark Davis doesn't like to be embarrassed. He'll run you out of town. Ask Jack Del Rio. So, I think that it'll be enough of an improvement. And then we'll be going into next year thinking okay, now we make the jump. Now we start contending for the division. So anyways, I'm getting way ahead of myself now. Which is week one.
But Murph, listen, a 3-game improvement would be a big deal. I know for some people it's playoffs or nothing, and I understand that. But really, a 3-game improvement over last year with a complete roster turnover for the most part is pretty significant. So we'll have to see where it goes. But we have to see improvement week by week. To me, that's where you're on the right track. And yes, you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes that happens when you're developing a team in what is a rebuild. Let's call it what it is. So we'll see what happens there and how it all goes down. But a busy week ahead for the Raiders as they prepare, go all the way back to Las Vegas and then get all the way to Buffalo. Luckily, it's during warm weather. Now, we had rain up in that area today. Hopefully the rain stays away next week. It's supposed to be pretty cool, but not cold. So that's good for the Raiders. Murph, before we get out of here, too, I want to make sure we always touch on the shows here, the One Nation Foundation, what you, Michelle, Swag, Jeff, and the team do there with the One Nation Foundation and how people can take advantage of being part of it and donating so that we can help folks inside Raider Nation and great charities.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking, as always. And so once we figured out we could make money with our show with Raiders Fan Radio, we decided we want to give 100% of that money away, and we give it strictly to Raiders-related charities. We gave some money to the Raider Dad folks and helped provide a tailgate for 54 families to go to a Raider game where they take underprivileged kids and not only just the kids, but their parental figures to the game and provided a tailgate experience. And it's an amazing organization, and we're going to look to double our efforts with them for next year or more. But anyways, because it's so we had a chance. Swag and I went out to Vegas this year and had a chance to see what they did firsthand in the preseason game against the Niners. Great folks. So we're gonna be very happy to partner with them again. And then also we were able to raise 15. Not I say we. It's Raider Nation. It's our listeners of our show, and folks like yourself that give to the One Nation Foundation, and so collectively we were able to raise $15,000 to give to the Bolitnikovs, who Tracy's Place of Hope and the Bolitnikov Center of Hope are the 2 facilities that their foundation funds, and they provide safe spaces for young women that are at risk of domestic violence or substance abuse, but offers them rehabilitative services. So teaches them things like domestic skills and whatever, and how to reacclimate once they get back out. So they're wonderful organizations, and we're thrilled that our foundation gives to those, and we're looking to keep going. We've brought on some amazing corporate partners this year. The boy Will Compton, who's become a buddy of ours, is supporting the foundation. The amazing support that we get from you and from Mo and from Silver and Black today, could not be more grateful for the partnership that you all have provided for us. And so we're going to look to keep taking this thing bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more, maybe expanding outside of even Raiders related charities and getting into other players' charities. Like the more that we can do to share with folks that are in need, like that's kind of what we feel like our calling is. We love it when people support Raiders Fan Radio, and I love doing Raiders Fan Radio. But I feel like Raiders Fan Radio exists nowadays to support the One Nation Foundation, and so I can't thank everybody enough for the support and the endorsement that you all have given us, and even for those that can't support it monetarily, we have advertising opportunities with Raiders Fan Radio. So just hit a like, hit a subscribe, share it with your friends, retweet a thing, any of that kind of stuff that gives exposure. It's not about building our audience per se, like for our own glorification. It's about building our audience so we have a broader reach to generate advertising dollars is what it's all about. So I can't thank you enough, Scott, as always, for the platform to talk about the One Nation Foundation. And thank you to everybody that's out there. I'm sure many people in the chat room that are participants. We love you guys and couldn't be more honored to be the vessel for Raider Nation and the giving and the amazing, like we say this thing is La Familia, and it's not a joke. Like, it's not. We couldn't be more thankful to be part of that. Thank you guys.
No, and it's remarkable how much Raider fans, Raider Nation supports one another. I mean, you hear about somebody that's having trouble, and man, people come, they go to action. They don't wait around and say, oh, this, that. They just go to action, and part of that is exactly what you guys do and the charities that you've been raising funds for. So it's phenomenal, and make sure you do that. Again, all the super chats we do this year on Silver and Black Today are going right to the foundation as well. So however you feel good. On Wednesday nights, go watch Raiders Fan Radio. It's a blast. I do it. I'm usually drinking a bourbon and smoking a cigar. And chiming in with chat here and stuff. It's a good time. So make sure you follow them up on YouTube and also subscribe to their podcast as well. All right, Murf, I will talk to you next week, man, after the Buffalo game. It'll be interesting.
It'll be interesting. We're either going to be ready to freaking take over the world or we'll all be in our feelings. You know what I mean? But
yes.
We'll be in our feelings one way or the other. We're going to win this game by 30, and there's going to be some parts of Raider Nation that are going to be like, oh, yeah, well, Josh McDaniels.
That's right. They just want the trophy. They just want the Lombardi trophy, and you understand it. All right, my friend. I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thank y'all. Love you guys.
All right. There you go. I want to thank again Murf for coming on and thank all of you for being with us. A reminder, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the show on audio. Even if you just watch us on video, which is great. You make fun of my forehead, all that jazz. I love it. Self-deprecating humor. It's good. It's good for me. I don't care either way. But nonetheless, thank you guys for being with us. All of you in the chat on all the different platforms has been fantastic. Thank you for being with us. Raider Worm, Oakland Raider Tucker, Michelle Sweet's in there. Also Daniel. Who else is in there? Jordan Ford. I'm a man from St. Louis. And lots of you folks are in there. So we appreciate you. Gladiator Raider, excuse me. So thank you guys all for chatting in there on the YouTube page and for being with us as well. We can't do it without you, so we appreciate it. And even if you watch on video, that's the point I was trying to make. Subscribe to the audio. It helps Mo and I out. Mo, of course, usually here he's doing his post-game shows with Bleacher Report. Now he does a quick thing right after the game for a few minutes, and then he's back to writing. I'm leaving you now, too, because I have to cover the rest of the NFL for sportsnot.com, so I got to go write some packages. I also have to write my Raiders story for sportsnot.com, which you can see tomorrow on the site. Just follow me on Twitter at LVGully, and you can follow the content we're doing there as well. But thank you guys for being with us and for following the show. Until next week, I should say, live next week, but we will have a new show as we always do on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we'll have blitzes in between on Friday as well. So make sure you tune in to Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. For our producer, Mike Robier, for Momote and for Murf, I'm Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black Today. You guys have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk to you this week.